This is your second and final lecture on the religion of Buddha Dharma or Buddhism.
Okay, if you're taking good notes here about Buddha Dharma, what I need you to do is to, first of all, realize in your outline that there are two major traditions within Buddha Dharma. The oldest is the minority tradition and is sometimes referred to as the lesser vehicle because it is the minority tradition. Approximately 18 to 20% of those who claim a Buddha Dharma identity are part of the Theravada tradition. Okay, the Theravada tradition. Again, it is the oldest of the Buddhist traditions, and the focus within the Theravada tradition is primarily upon the historical figure Siddhartha Gautama and his teachings. We're going to see in the other school of Buddha Dharma, which we'll get to in just a moment, that yes, there is belief in the historical figure Siddhartha Gautama, but more important than the historical figure is a sort of cosmic or universal presence of wisdom or energy that the deceased Buddha spirit passes on to the adherents of this religion. The primary focus within Theravada Buddhism is in the triple gem. The triple gem is three particular places where the Buddhist finds refuge or finds security or safety. And these three parts of the triple gem are based upon the book of Holy Scripture, which you can see listed here on the second bullet, the Tipitaka, and sometimes you'll see this spelled Tripitaka, but the Tipitaka or the Tripitaka is the book of Holy Scripture that defines the three safe places as being the person of the Buddha, and then his teachings, which we would call the Dharma, and then the Sangha, you will perhaps remember from last time, is the community of bhikshus or bhikshunis, the disciples or monks following the teachings of the Buddha. So you find your safety, you find your refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the Sangha. There is a strong focus upon meditation within this tradition. Please get down a word that is not written on this slide that you will need to have down here. The meditation comes in two movements, and the first movement is the one that is not listed on the slide here, and that is the samatha movement of meditation. Samatha is spelled just like Samantha, but without the N. Okay, no N. Samatha. And samatha is when you attempt to quiet your mind, to get your mind to come to a place of rest, rather than continually racing through thoughts about, what happened yesterday or what's going to happen later today or tomorrow. And once you've come to the place of samatha rest, where the mind is very quiet, the hope is that you will then come to a time of enlightenment, and that second movement toward enlightenment is the word you do see on this slide, the vipassana meditation. Vipassana meditation is coming to a new awareness or an enlightenment about the reality of your life, perhaps a purpose or a meaning, and certainly since we're talking about Buddha Dharma, a greater ability to let go of the self, to let go of the ego. Because Theravada Buddhists do focus quite a bit upon the historical figure of Siddhartha Gautama, we see a great deal of devotion and a great deal of attention paid to rituals and relics, honoring the Buddha. A relic would be something that is believed to have belonged to be a part of the Buddha or to have belonged to Siddhartha Gautama. Oftentimes you will have someone with a chip of a bone that they will claim was part of Siddhartha Gautama, or even a splinter of wood that was part of a bowl or some other vessel that Siddhartha Gautama ate from or drank from. So anything that is a physical, tangible item that could tie a person or the person's household to the historical figure Siddhartha Gautama would be referred to as a relic. Okay, as you continue in your notes here, the much larger tradition within Buddha Dharma, and this would be about 78 to 80% of the world's Buddhists are actually part of the Vajrayana tradition. And as mentioned on the previous slide, what I was telling you is that even though there is belief in the historical figure Siddhartha Gautama, what's much more important to the Vajrayana tradition is the belief that the deceased Buddha continues to have a pervasive spirit presence everywhere throughout the cosmos, everywhere throughout the universe. Because there is the belief in more than one Buddha. You will have different depictions of a Buddha figure. Oftentimes, these teachers are called bodhisattvas. You can see that term listed on the second bullet here. A person, back up just a little bit here, a person who achieves enlightenment or reaches enlightenment in the Buddhist tradition is referred to as an arhat. An arhat, however, is not necessarily one who will teach his or her enlightenment to others. An arhat who does decide to teach the path of enlightenment is called a bodhisattva. So make sure that you can differentiate between those two terms. An arhat is simply one who has been enlightened, and a bodhisattva is an enlightened one who is committed to teaching others the path of enlightenment. And because this is a very diverse school of Buddha Dharma, you're going to see some various expressions of it here in just a moment. We do need to understand that there are different representations of the Buddha. Pictured here is one portrayal of Guanyin. Guanyin is a Buddha that is sometimes depicted as a male, sometimes as a female. And therefore, this Buddha is one that we would describe as androgynous. If androgynous is a new word for you, it's a good word to have in your vocabulary. Andros is the Greek term for man, and gyno is the Greek term for woman. And so an androgynous being is one who has both male and female characteristics. And we certainly see the depictions of Guanyin sometimes as a man, sometimes as a woman, and oftentimes you will see when Guanyin is a woman that she will be holding a child, and a Mahayana Buddhist would view himself or herself as the child being held by Guanyin, therefore being protected by Guanyin. The Mahayana tradition also stresses meditation, just like the older Theravada tradition. And similar to the meditative move of samatha, where you empty yourself, the Mahayana tradition stresses this same concept with the term sunyata. That sunyata is making space in your soul, making space in your spirit, and emptiness, so that something new can be placed there. So all of the sort of preconceived ideas or the presuppositions that you have about what makes you important or what makes you valuable, even in comparison to others, what makes you better than someone else, all of those obsessions must be let go of. You must empty yourself of all of that. That would be sunyata. And then in the emptiness, your true identity could be found through meditation. Now again, Theravada and Mahayana, but within the Mahayana tradition we do have at least four schools that we want to address. Let's begin with probably the most familiar form of Buddha Dharma, that is the Zen tradition. Pictured here you have 2 of 10 pictures that are part of the story of an ox herder who is searching for his ox who has run away. And the story that's told in the 10 pictures is that this ox herder is, of course, obsessed with retaining his possession, his ox that he's lost. And we see the journey of him first seeing some hoof prints of the ox, and then seeing the ox in a meadow, and then finally he comes so close to the ox that he is able to eventually capture the ox. And then the ox once again runs away, and you see a picture of emptiness here with the circle on the right, and that would be a sort of a sunyata experience. That now this is the circle is actually the 9th picture of the 10, and that now the ox has been lost once again, and so why carry on with the obsession of saying, I have to have that ox, or for our culture today, I have to have that car, I have to have that house, or I have to have that person be my boyfriend or girlfriend. All of that obsession, the Zen Buddhist will say you finally have to let go of. And if we could, don't have the 10th and final picture here, you will perhaps see it in your textbook, is a picture of a Buddha-like figure who is the ox herder. The ox herder has become enlightened and realizes he no longer needs to stay with that obsession of retaining property, retaining that material item, in his case the ox. Now, one thing that is unique about Zen or Chan Buddhism is the belief that enlightenment is not something that will come to you gradually, but that enlightenment is something that will come to you suddenly. And there are 2 terms for this sudden burst of enlightenment that will take place in Zen Buddhism. Kensho and Satori. Okay, both of those words are on the slide here at the bottom. Kensho and Satori are the sudden burst of enlightenment. And perhaps most well known about the Zen Buddhist tradition is that in the midst of meditation, there is the use of koans. And koans are questions that have no logical answer. And so the question is intended to be repeated in the mind over and over and over again. And because the question has no logical or rational answer, this is an attempt to make your mind let go of always having to have a rational explanation, always having to have everything make sense on a logical level. Only when you can let go of that can you come to enlightenment. Probably the most well-known example of a koan is the somewhat humorous question, if a tree falls in the woods and no one is present, does it make a noise? Okay, many of you may have heard that before. Of course, initially you would think, well, of course it's going to make a noise whether a person's there or not. But then the logic would come in and say, but wait, the only way we say that there is noise if there is someone with ears who's able to perceive the noise, and that's what makes a noise, that it's able to be heard. And so you can kind of go back and forth on that. And again, it's the idea of asking a question to try to make you let go of this obsession with the rational and logical world. Okay, especially in Far East Asia, we have a Pure Land tradition of Buddhism, and for the most part, I told you that Buddha Dharma is a non-theistic religion, but the Pure Land tradition comes closest to viewing the Buddha as a sort of personal God, and so realize that we do have diversity within this world religion. The primary Buddha within the Pure Land tradition is Amitabha, and Amitabha is here pictured with two heavenly consorts, again adding to the idea of a personal God within the Pure Land tradition. The land within the Pure Land tradition is stressed in a couple of ways. First of all, the belief is that within nature there are particular places that the Buddha cosmic energy has designed for all of us to have a meeting with God. And most often we see this pictured as mountains. As you all who have been around mountains at all in your lives, oftentimes a fog or cloud cover will come over the top of a mountain. And of course, for the ancient mind, that was the belief that the gods are there on top of the mountains, and so it is therefore a meeting place. And then also is the idea within Pure Land tradition is the idea that the gods' ultimate reality has granted land to your particular group of people as a safe haven, as a refuge for your people. And so, especially if it's a time when another group of people is oppressing you or trying to take your land from you, you would show your devotion to Amitabha Buddha with the hope that Amitabha will protect your people and your land. Of all the traditions of Buddha Dharma, Amitabha Buddha and the Pure Land tradition probably the least ascetic and the least strict of the schools of Buddha Dharma. This focuses very much upon the hope of nirvana coming after this life, and that you can actually experience some of the bliss and joy of nirvana in this life. You're going to see other traditions of Buddha Dharma that are much more strict, especially these next two that we look at, but Pure Land would be the least ascetic or least strict of the Buddhist traditions. Pictured here is Nikadatsu Fuji, who is a primary teacher of the Nichiren Tradition. Nichiren Buddhism seems to come around in the 14th century CE or AD, and this fellow here, Mr. Fuji, his teachings, even though you may have never heard of him before, his teachings greatly influenced someone who I'm certain you've heard of, Mohandas or Mahatma Gandhi. And of course, Gandhi had a great influence upon Martin Luther King Jr. The focus within the Nichiren tradition is to try to move away from self and to focus more on society. That if your primary goal within religion is simply to save the self, that would be a very egotistical form of religion. And so the Nichiren tradition says that we all should be much more focused upon the greater good of society. And we have to be somewhat careful here with the bias and prejudice that we have with the way media throws words around. But oftentimes we hear today in the media social activism and social justice are used as litmus words for liberalism. But within the Nichiren tradition, that is the goal of religion, is to be socially active, and by being socially active, bring about greater justice. This tradition goes back to a young fisherman named Nichiren, and Nichiren is coming into the Buddhist tradition having been trained by two bodhisattvas, okay, two enlightened teachers, and their names tell you everything about them: superb action and always abused. If I could make a parallel with another world religion here for just a moment to help this make some sense for you, within Judaism and later Christianity, there is focus upon a book in the Hebrew Bible named after a prophet Isaiah. And this prophet Isaiah has 4 passages in which he describes a suffering servant. And later, the Christian New Testament will pick up on this concept of a suffering servant and assign that role to Jesus of Nazareth, of course, the Christ who was crucified. And so here we see in that tradition that the suffering servant, later Jesus Christ, is a person of superb action, and because of that superb action, he is crucified. And so that would be the always abused aspect here of the Nichiren tradition. And so the belief within the Nichiren tradition is that when you stand up for what is right, when you speak out on behalf of others who are oppressed or downtrodden or in poverty, then because you are speaking out for those people, you will likely face abuse or persecution for that. And so that's why it's very important in this tradition that these two bodhisattvas come together, that the person of superb action will be one who is always abused. Yet nonetheless, there needs to be that commitment to speaking up for those who are oppressed in order for justice to be actualized. Okay, and your 4th and final school within the Mahayana tradition is probably the most visible and well-known tradition within Buddha Dharma today. That's the Vajrayana tradition, and pictured here is the 14th Dalai Lama, and I would probably say next to Pope Benedict XVI, this would be the most globally recognized religious leader or religious figure in the world today. You're going to have a picture in just a moment on a future slide of Benedict XVI and the Dalai Lama meeting with one another. What you need to have down in your notes for the Vajrayana tradition is that it is considered the most aggressive form of Buddha Dharma, and that it tries to hasten or speed up the path to enlightenment. By the way, a lama, and Dalai Lama, a lama is a teacher, and a Dalai is the most enlightened of the teachers. And so the Dalai Lama is the primary teacher within this tradition. We haven't had the term yoga in a while, not since Sanatana Dharma, but we do have a form of yoga called deity yoga within this tradition, and this refers back to the aggressive nature of this Buddha Dharma and trying to speed up that process of enlightenment. Deity yoga is the belief that you are already a bodhisattva, you are already a Buddha, you're already an enlightened person, and you just have life experiences that have become a crust over that Buddha, over that bodhisattva, that enlightened one. And so deity yoga is to try to imagine and envision yourself as one who is already enlightened. And the more that you're able to do that, that crust of life experience that has blinded you from seeing that you are enlightened will break and fall apart, and then you will finally emerge as a deity, as a Buddha, as an enlightened one. So that's what is meant by deity yoga. Okay, there's only 2 holy days that you're responsible for Buddha Dharma. Most importantly, make sure you have the term Vesak down in your notes. For both Theravada and Mahayana Buddhist, Vesak is the day, the anniversary of celebrating the enlightenment of Siddhartha Gautama. Okay, the enlightenment of Siddhartha Gautama is celebrated on Vesak. And you may want to ask, what date is Vesak? Well, there's no definitive answer to that, because depending on the Buddhist tradition, the date changes from time to time. but a Vesak is what you're responsible for. And again, that is the anniversary of Siddhartha Gautama's enlightenment. Now, for that smaller tradition, Theravada Buddhist, as you can see pictured here, there is also the belief that the birth of Siddhartha Gautama and the death of Siddhartha Gautama fall on this same day of Vesak. So for Mahayana, this is only the celebration of the Buddha's enlightenment, but for the Theravada tradition, it is on the same date that you have the birth, the enlightenment, and the death of Siddhartha Gautama. And then secondly, Maja Puja Day is another Buddhist holy day you're responsible to know about. And after the Buddha was enlightened and he was teaching in northeast India, he had many converts come to his teaching and become bhikshus, become disciples of the Buddha Dharma. And so that mass conversion of those individuals is referred to as Maja Puja Day, the anniversary of that. Buddhism has done very well in the West. Most in the West who are drawn toward Buddhism are more than Sanatana Dharma, because as referenced earlier, even though it is judgmental of Western thinkers to call the stories of Hinduism like Hanuman the Monkey Warrior and other such stories bizarre, Western prejudice have tended to go that way toward Hinduism and other Eastern religions. But because Buddhism is non-theistic and does not have those kind of stories, it has tended to be the form of Eastern religion that has done best in the West. Many people in Western Europe and America have grown very disgusted by the materialism and the consumerism that is everywhere in our culture of I have to own this, I have to have this, and building up so much debt that you're drowning in it, all because of a culture that continues to shout and sometimes subtly whisper that we have to have these particular things in order to be happy, in order to be important. And so Buddha Dharma, with its focus upon simplicity, has been a path for many people to try to avoid that sort of materialism. And there are even some Buddhist scholars in the East that have suggested that the way that Buddha Dharma is being practiced in the West is more akin to what Siddhartha Gautama intended than some of the superstitious forms of Buddha Dharma that are thriving in the East today, especially those forms that focus upon the collection of relics as though that would somehow bring one to enlightenment. Buddhist scholars in the East feel, again, that that is more superstitious than what Siddhartha Gautama would have intended. And this religion is extremely egalitarian today. Pictured here is a bhikshuni having her head shaved and becoming part of a monastic community. We live in interesting times. Within the past 50 years, there have been more bhikshunis ordained than in the previous 2,500 years. And we do see the continuing stress on social activism. To go back to that Nichiren tradition, this does seem to be one of the primary emphases within Buddha Dharma today, is the need to identify where there is oppression and where there is injustice in the world, and to peacefully, non-violently speak and act against that. And we have seen this especially in the areas of Myanmar, but even more so in Cambodia. And so with that information, we'll go ahead and conclude Buddha Dharma, and you can look for a lecture on religions that are indigenous to China coming in the next few days. Hope you all are doing well. Goodbye.